I couldn't sleep this morning, so I went on a walk with my camera. I'm not used to shooting photography in the mornings because I'm an insomniac. So usually what tends to happen is I stay up quite late and I end up sleeping until late in the mornings. And usually this is because my creativity kind of switches on when I'm about to go to sleep. I don't know if this happens to other creative people out there, but I tend to find that my best edits come between 12 at night and 2 a.m. for some reason. But this morning I unintentionally woke up at 7 a.m. having gone to sleep around 2, and I'm ill, and it was scheduled to rain. So all the odds were stacked against me, but I decided to kind of pick myself up out of bed and make something out of my morning. And it would be a nice experiment to shoot outdoors early in the morning, as I'm not used to it. And actually I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a few things. At this point you may be wondering who I am. Well, my name is Tomas. I'm a professional videographer and photographer. Most of my paid work is video work, so photography feels more like a hobby and more of a space to play. The most I've done in photography is street photography, just simply because I really enjoy that kind of childlike feeling when you get that shot where something is not staged but rather you're capturing a moment that happened naturally, and I love getting that buzz of capturing that moment. And now back to the photos. To start with, I was not very agile with this new lens, as I'm not used to shooting on this 33mm prime. I've always been used to shooting on a zoom lens, and this was my first time using a prime, and I realized I used to rely quite heavily on my zoom for my compositions. So the start was a bit clunky. I came across this scene with some men fixing some sort of steam train. I think this was a lovely scene, but with a bit more experience with this lens I could have done it justice. This one with the man fixing the side of the train where his head kind of disappears into the shadows is quite interesting, but the framing is a bit busy. Don't love the composition. So again, a nice scene, but I feel like with me using this lens for the first time, I wasn't quite sure how to depict it properly. Right next to it there was this sort of translucent blue teal wall that was really nice with the light hitting it. I noticed this door, and it would have been great if someone walked out of the door to sort of balance those two posts on the right of the image, and then the third weight would be someone walking out that door with the light hitting them. That would have been great. Finally, I got close to this glass and noticed there was work happening right behind it. It was kind of see-through, and I think I will come back to this spot because I feel like there's potential for a great shot there. I just need maybe to wait for the person to notice me, look up, and then capture the shot. Further along, I ran into the first good scene of the day, I would say, in terms of location and lighting. It was this corner on the street where there was a big red brick wall which ran into some teal tiles. That's a funny thing to say. And right behind me, where I was taking the shots from, there was the side of a building which was kind of a reflective metal sort of material, and so it was bouncing light back onto that corner, and it was making it quite kind of glary and interesting. So I set up camp there waiting for the perfect subject to pass through, and at one point it actually happened. However, I was not in burst mode because I hadn't changed it from before, and I think I just caught her slightly late. I wish I had caught her at the moment where she would be between the sign of the road and before she's hitting the tiles, especially because she's dressed in blue, so the contrast would make her stand out really nicely. Either way, I'm quite happy with the shot. It has an interesting feel to it, almost like those commercials where they film the talent with a big reflector.
because there was a reflector, just a massive building right behind me.
Firstly, as I expected, I found that I was overly relying on my zoom previously. I used to shoot on the 18 to 55, and I could tell that I was looking for those kinds of shots with my eyes, but when I was putting the camera up to them, I could obviously not achieve that shot because I can't zoom in. So quickly I had to kind of readapt my thinking of where I was looking for frames and where my eyes were finding frames on the street, so that it would work for this new focal length, and kind of it made me think a bit harder. All the possibilities weren't open to me, which is to be expected with a prime lens. But it was interesting. It was fun to have to work a bit harder to get the frame that I want.
Just a bit later I came across another great scene. This one without a subject, but nonetheless it was great colors, great shadows, just overall quite pleasing, quite neat place, with this ladder placed against the side of a boat with the contrast of the red and the blue, and the angle of the shadow of the ladder falling quite nicely. So I took this shot, and then I decided to pull back a bit and notice this tower poking out behind the ship, and composed it in a few different ways, and I ended up with this one, which is actually quite a fun one. It kind of feels like the ladder is placed for you to ascend up to the tower. The shadow starts right on the edge of the tower, aligns perfectly with the ladder, and it's kind of quite like a fun little composition. It's simple, but it works really well. So these two shots I'm quite happy with. I then ran into this door. It's just quite a nice door. I like the colors in it. I turned around, and on the same boat that I had taken a shot of before, there was kind of this big white sheet draped over it, and people were just kind of walking out of the back of it. And I got a nice few shots there. I think my favorite one is the one of these two ladies, but there's also this old man sort of standing over in the distance. I'm happy with these. I quite like the size proportions, comparing the size of the boat to the people walking past it. It kind of puts it into perspective. It has almost like a poetic feel to it, in the sense of this fallen boat with that drape over it, as if it was a fallen soldier, but it's quite big, and at the same time people are walking past it unfazed. Maybe a bit too poetic for that matter, but I quite like it. Around the corner from there was this nice car. Lovely shadows falling on it from the trees. I was getting a simple shot of it, and then this biker came through, and I actually like it more with the biker in front of it. I stepped in closer to get a shot of half of the car, to focus on those shadows and how the shadows played with the red, similar to the door. Sometimes simple is enough.
Another thing I liked about the morning is that it is quiet, and I like peace and quiet. It lets me work better, think better, frame my shots better. But not only that, obviously the light is nice in the morning, but there's a difference between the morning and the evening, and that is there's less people around. So if you find a nice location with a nice light and you're waiting for a subject to pass through, it's more likely for it to be one subject. Whereas in the evening there's a lot of people around, especially if it's a sunny day, so it will be busy. But actually in the morning you get one runner, one cyclist, one old person, and that kind of makes taking the photos easier.
And then I came across the perfect scene. The scene that allowed me to take one of my favorite street photography shots to date. It was this old man sat at this bus stop on his own, and the way the light was coming through on this particular bus stop, and the angle of the light, and his white hair, and how the highlights of his white hair were interacting. I started walking around him trying to find the right framing, because he was facing the other way, which is perfect for me, because I could take my time to walk around him without him noticing. And then this angled shadow came across the bus stop, and it was perfect. And I started to get shots of it further away, and then closer and closer and closer, until I got this shot. In this shot specifically, the metal bar going across from the bus stop is perfectly covering the bit of grass on the other side of the man. And this is great because I wanted to get rid of that green. That works perfectly as a happy accident, and I think that makes it better than the other shots. Not only that, but the way the light is hitting the back of his head, how he's looking towards the right, how the shadows are angled in the same direction that he's looking. Also, the fact that he's on the other side of the dirty glass acts as a filter in a way to diffuse those highlights, and it gives it a bit of a dreamy quality. The colors are lovely as well. The red of the seat, the blue of his collar, which kind of works well with the blue graffiti in the background. And I don't normally love logos front and center in photos, but actually the red accents on the logo of his backpack work really well with the red seat. So getting rid of that green from the grass makes it a much more coherent image color wise. This is definitely one of my favorite shots that I've taken to date, and I was so excited when I got it, and it made the whole walk worth it just for this one shot.
I love old people, and mornings kind of is where they are at. And I think old people, in general terms, always seem more interesting to me when I'm taking photography. I'm drawn to them, and I found this morning that there was an abundance of them, and that made me happy. It also kind of creates the opportunity to start conversations with older people if I'm taking photos of them and they notice me and they're not annoyed by it. Some are grumpy, some are nice. But I like chatting to old people. And I'm just using the term old as an objective term. If you have any negative connotations for the term old, then that's your problem. You can learn a lot from them, and you can learn a lot from looking at them, and therefore you can learn a lot from taking photos of them. So I really enjoyed taking photos of all the people this morning. Another thing that I quickly learned was that it was actually so quiet, and because of the new lens I was getting closer to my subjects than I'm used to, that I had to put my shutter in electronic shutter, and I basically had to be stealthier than I usually am used to being to get the shots that I wanted to get.
I then came across this motorway underpass. Initially there wasn't that much going on there, but then I noticed on the other side there was a cyclist with his child kind of practicing on the pump track, and I think the silhouette cut against the shapes of the columns of the underpass, it almost looks like film strip in this picture. And then from this other angle you can see him going across in the middle of the frame, and I cropped it to a 2:35 or 39 ratio, can't remember, one of the two, but still leaving that sliver of sky to the top right to give it that context of where he is in relation to the camera. And it's not an amazing shot, but it's quite nice, quite aesthetically pleasing. So that concludes my morning walk photography. If you're still watching, thank you, I really appreciate it. What I've learned from this experience is that next time when I can't sleep, I'm better off just getting out of bed and going to take photos in the morning. That shot with the old man at the bus stop was so rewarding, and it was so worth it to go out in the morning just for that one shot. Thanks again for watching. I'm aware I'm not the most engaging speaker at the moment. I'm not the extrovert type, and it's quite awkward for me to talk to camera for the first time. I'm used to being behind the camera. So hopefully this will get better over time, and maybe not being ill will make a difference on the next video. Until next time.